What are you talking about? You had on a headlock. When you tried to Cody, I was there. I write a statement.
Arrested. I'm not arrested. They can fucking gun on the street.
I'm licensed to carry.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, bitch.
You shot somebody, nigga.
So a lot of information came out in court today. Witnesses saying what they saw, but you were there. What's your reaction to what you heard came out in court today?
When I heard it, I'm just looking, you know, it was unbelievable, but I was there. And I know for a fact none of that happened, how they just explained it. But my truth will get out here, and I hope everybody understand. That's really it. I can't even say too much right now. You know, because it's just going to feel like I'm going against them, they going against me, we just going back and forth. But the truth is going to come out.
When Quadajah Johnson, a.k.a. Holly, and her sidekick Carlos rolled up on Romeca Meeks that September afternoon, they thought the story would write itself: a quick confrontation, a deadly blow, a flimsy self-defense claim, and another black woman erased without consequence. They thought Meeks would bleed out, be stamped just another statistic, and the world would shrug while her killer walked free. But they miscalculated. They didn't count on the rage, the raw, unfiltered fury of every witness standing yards away watching Romeca collapse in her own blood, or the tidal wave of strangers who later watched that video and felt something break inside them. They didn't count on the army of people, Meeks' loved ones and people who had never even heard her name until that day, who refused to let her die quietly. For nearly 3 months, they pushed. They protested. They flooded prosecutors. They dug up receipts that Holly never expected anyone to find. And eventually, the wall cracked. Johnson was finally charged, dragged into accountability not by conscience or law, but by a community that refused to let Romeca's story be buried. One step closer to justice, and a reminder that some names will not go quietly into statistics. Welcome to the American Crime Femicide channel. Please like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for future uploads. Reporter Tia Ewing finally got her hands on the charging documents, and when she laid out the facts, it became painfully clear why prosecutors had no choice but to put handcuffs on Holly.
So in this case, DMV, victim being Romeca, D being Johnson. So I'll just alternate the names. So Quadajah Johnson and Romeca Blackmon each have a child with witness one in this case. All three parties got into a dispute near a school. Johnson threatened Blackmon multiple times in front of witnesses. Johnson then retrieved a handgun, shot Blackmon multiple times in front of witnesses. This is according to the Cook County. This was filed for the murder charge, the first degree murder charge. So again, Johnson threatened Blackmon multiple times in front of witnesses. Johnson then retrieved a handgun, shot Blackmon multiple times in front of witnesses, and then we know, sadly, Blackmon died. Johnson murdered Blackmon after Blackmon had just dropped her child off at school. Johnson celebrated the murder immediately after. Johnson was undeterred by the presence of witnesses, public setting, broad light near a school, and near many children. Multiple civilian calls to 911 before and after the murder. It basically goes on to say that she deserves to be held behind bars because clearly she doesn't care about the harm, and based on the previous circumstance that happened, nothing would stop her is essentially what it says. Now, this is what the court is alleging. Now, this is a 3-page document of all of the facts from the court. So it says, witness one has a 6-month-old child in common with Johnson, as well as a 6-year-old child in common with Blackmon, the victim. In December 2024, the defendant sought a stalking no contact order against the victim, alleging that the victim made verbal threats to the defendant through the defendant's family members. The defendant in this case, let's go back. So in December of 2024, the defendant sought a stalking no contact order against, so that means that Johnson sought that stalking no contact order against Romeca, alleging that Romeca made that verbal threats to her through Johnson's family members. Johnson did not allege that Blackmon committed any acts of violence against her. The order of protection was granted in July of 2025, but was never served on the victim. I think I kind of mentioned that a little bit earlier. On September 8th of 2025, just before 8:30 in the morning, Witness 1 drove his black Mercedes SUV from his home located on South State Street. So this is the father in all of this, to the location of 20 West Cermak. Johnson was seated in the front passenger seat, and the 6-month-old child was in the rear. So the child was present through all of this, Johnson's child, in the removable car seat of the Mercedes. The defendant was dressed in a black jacket, that being Johnson, with green leggings. The father double parked his Mercedes on Cermak 2 car lengths in front of Johnson's black Chevy Cruze. Johnson and the father of their child then removed their child from the Mercedes and walked towards Johnson's Chevy and loaded the child into Johnson's vehicle. At approximately the same time, the victim drove her white Kia sedan to a school located nearby. The victim was dressed in a light pink outfit. She dropped her 6-year-old son off at school and then drove to where Johnson's Chevy and the father of their child was parked on Cermak. Romeca double parked her Kia on Cermak behind the father's Mercedes and got out, while Johnson stood outside of her car. At this time, Witness 2, who does not know any of the parties, so a witness on the street, drove past Romeca, Johnson, and the father, observing that Johnson and Romeca standing in the street arguing, but unable to hear exactly what was being said. This person observed the father standing in between the two ladies with his arms extended, and then observed the Johnson, she's D in this case, the defendant, Johnson away. So witness 2 observed the father push Johnson away from Romeca, while that doesn't make sense, doesn't that, Flan? While Romeca, unarmed, stood stationary with her arms crossed across her chest. Minutes later, another witness on an eastbound bus that drove past saw this argument again between Johnson and Romeca. She observed, and bus video captured, Romeca and the father standing in the open driver's door area of Romeca's Kia. At this time, this witness was walking east on Cermak, approaching State Street. This witness got out the bus, walked across Cermak, and stood under the CTA green line stop near another witness. Those 2 witnesses also don't know any of the parties involved. They observed the father standing in between the 2 mothers, Johnson and Romeca. They observed Johnson walk towards the driver's door of the Kia, standing in the threshold of the driver's door, with the father standing immediately outside of the driver's door. Johnson was standing on the sidewalk arguing with Romeca. Another witness observed the father strike Romeca by repeatedly swinging the driver's door of the Kia closed on her. Another witness called 911 reported that the father had struck Romeca multiple times with the car door. After her 911 call, Romeca entered her car. After her 911 call, she entered her car. But 2 witnesses then observed Johnson approach Romeca's car and heard Johnson making threats towards Romeca. Another witness walked closer to the incident at this time. That person observed Romeca exit the Kia, and when she did, observed the father approach Romeca from behind and place her in a chokehold with his right arm while striking her with his left. This is hard to listen to because this is some acts of domestic violence here as well. This witness observed Romeca unarmed with her hands in the air trying to break free from the father's grasp. A witness heard Johnson make threats to shoot Romeca and heard the father tell Romeca that Johnson had a gun. Johnson then went to her vehicle, was observed by another witness retrieving a handgun and then standing on the sidewalk. The victim was able to break free from the father's hold and took steps away from Johnson as observed by another witness. That witness observed Johnson put her handgun at Romeca, walked toward Romeca, and then fired multiple times at her with a pause between the first shot and the subsequent shots. This witness had just turned to walk away when he heard, this is another witness, a gunshot, a pause, followed by 2 more gunshots. He looked toward the direction of the gunshots and observed the defendant holding a black handgun in her right hand. Romeca was struck multiple times and collapsed. 2 witnesses moved Romeca's body and moved her slightly west. I guess she must have fallen into traffic. That person then called 911 and reported that Johnson shot Romeca and observed the father and Johnson fist bump one another afterwards. Officers arrived and observed that Johnson was unresponsive, unarmed, and laying in a pool of blood. On scene and covered in blood, Johnson was also on the scene and had blood on her. So the father had blood on him, Johnson had blood on her. Romeca was transported to the hospital and pronounced dead shortly thereafter. Johnson was positively identified as the shooter. Johnson detained and admitted to the shooting. From her Chevy, officers recovered a loaded 9mm handgun. Evidence techs processed the scene, recovering 3 spent shell casings. Ballistics analysis revealed that all 3 of those spent shell casings were fired from Johnson's firearm recovered from the Chevy. This is crazy. Johnson refused medical attention, was transported to the police station where she claimed self-defense and acknowledged that this was the first time. Listen to this. Please, 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 please. If you don't hear nothing else I say, listen to this. This is insane. And this is why you don't get caught up. And why I made my statement earlier about not getting caught up in no mess. Does anybody know Carlos's last name? You guys keep putting that person in there. Who is Carlos in this case? You guys keep saying it. I want to repeat this last part. I just emailed, because you guys asked about Carlos. I just emailed to find out if he's been charged or will be facing charges. I'll have more to come on that. I want to read this last part again because it's very important. Okay. Johnson refused medical attention, was transported to the police station where she claimed self-defense and acknowledged that this was the first time. So this is all fueled by what? If this is the first time she had ever seen Blackmon in person. Johnson did have a valid FOID card and CCL at the time of the shooting. On background, she had had some other run-ins with the law. One run-in on record. Again, Johnson refused medical attention, was transported to the police station where she claimed self-defense and acknowledged this was the first time she had ever seen the victim in person. I don't know what you guys think about that, but I think that is the most awful thing I've ever heard. So you claim this person has threatened you through people. You've never seen them before in person. And why would you shoot them? Why would you feel emboldened enough to shoot them?
Let's be honest, after hearing the full breakdown of that day, it should not have taken a season and a half to charge Johnson. From the looks of it, Holly and Carlos didn't just show up. They arrived at that school like 2 discount villains in a low-budget crime film, fueled by ego, rage, and whatever delusion convinced them they could kill a woman in broad daylight and walk away clean. They confronted Romeca at her son's school, a place meant for learning, not live-action executions. A place where her child had to hear the gunshot, see the flashing ambulance lights, and not even know the chaos unfolding was tied to his mother's last breaths. But somehow, we are supposed to believe the man who claims he loved his son just stood there, watched, allowed it, Sir, how do you father a child but fold when it's time to protect the child's mother? And Holly, fresh off welcoming a baby, chose to celebrate motherhood by taking another woman's life. The irony is demonic. The audacity is astronomical, which is why prosecutors finally hit her with first-degree murder, not manslaughter, not oops, but the highest charge available. And the judge didn't play either. No bail. 0. Holly is sitting exactly where she belongs. Both of them should be punished. Point blank. And Carlos? Oh, he's next. He wasn't some innocent bystander. He was the hype man, the backup, the co-signer to Holly's self-defense fairy tale. Charge his ass too. Justice crawled for Meeks' family, but at least it's moving. Slowly, grudgingly, but moving. May Romeca Blackmon rest in peace, and may those responsible feel every inch of the consequences they tried to outrun.